Hi, Neil. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's nice to see you again, though I wish it were under better
Oh my
circumstances.
God, this is insane. I don't think I've ever witnessed anything like this at all. I think a lot of people want to hear from you. First of all, gosh, where do we start? I talked to Emma Kennery from Bloomberg just a few minutes ago, Neil, and we talked about this was a real tinderbox in terms of everything that was going on between Georgia certifying the Electoral College on Capitol Hill and then having all these people come in, pour into the Capitol at the president's invitation. So obviously, he seemed to encourage them to storm the Capitol building. So, Neil, what are the consequences for this?
Yeah, so first of all, Katie, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, he stoked this. He gave a speech this morning, knowing this count was happening and everything, encouraging people to, quote, march on the Capitol. And then he stood by for hours while there was an armed assault on the Capitol. And literally, we just got word that one person died, was shot in the Capitol. You see these horrific images. Um, and he does bear, I think, responsibility for it. So I guess there's kind of, if you were to think about it, there's a moral component, a leadership component, but there's also a legal component to
Well,
this. And so,
I think the moral component is pretty clear in terms of lacking any sense of morality or respect for the rule of law or democracy. So let's talk legally as
well,
a
before that
lawyer.
though, just Katie, the one thing I do want to say that is moral, to me, the moral judgment here is not just about Donald Trump. It's about a party that has coddled him and stood by. And nobody should be shocked that today happened. I mean, this is a guy who in May, the president tweeted, when the looting starts, the shooting starts, in response to Black Lives Matter protesters. And then in June, tear gassed folks in Lafayette Square. And then 2 months later in August, celebrated what Kyle Rittenhouse did, killing two individuals. In September, the next month, said, about the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by during the presidential debate. In October, the next month, when the Michigan governor was discovered to have a plot to kidnap her violently, stood by and did basically nothing. And all through this has been saying things like Asian American, things like the Chinese flu and stuff like that is leading to hate crimes against Asian Americans. But, and the Republican Party has stood by and encouraged this and had not said anything where, like Susan Collins, I hope they learned his lesson, or this garbage like that. And so I do think that they bear moral responsibility here. I think the legal questions, I don't think, that complicity extends that far. But I think on a moral basis, absolutely, these folks should be looking at the mirror tonight and saying, what have I wrought? All in the name of power, all in the name of because I was afraid of Donald Trump or whatever. This is what I've turned America into. These people should be ashamed. They should resign. They should at least apologize. We still haven't even heard a single Republican say, I'm sorry, or anything like that. Okay, sorry for that.
No. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it was surprising actually to hear Mitch McConnell be somebody who has been one of the enablers in chief, who has not spoken out against the president or any of his behavior for 4 years, that he actually gave a speech today saying how important this was and how damaging this would be to the republic if this election is not recognized and a peaceful transfer of power doesn't happen.
Absolutely. And so I think you've had both the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell today saying that. And even before that, you had even diehard Republicans like Senator Tom Cotton saying, I'm not going on along with this nonsense of Josh Hawley. You had Senators Inhofe and Moran, two of the most conservative senators in the past few days saying the same thing. So I think, the day started out with a note of optimism. But now here we are several hours into this armed assault on the Capitol. And we hear crickets from the Republicans. We hear crickets from the acting attorney general of the United States. I mean, finally, like 10, 15 minutes ago, issued a, mealy-mouthed statement saying, I condemn the violence or something. He's been nowhere. This is the same guy who was wanting to throw the book at Black Lives Matter protesters and call them seditious conspirators and the like. But on something like this, seems like, finally got around to saying something, but not much.
I wanted to mention it. A woman apparently, it's Pete Williams, my former colleague at NBC, is reporting that the woman, we don't have any details about her, but who was shot, I guess, inside the Capitol building, has died. I think there are also some police officers. And one of the questions I was asking Emma earlier, Neil, is, and then I really want to talk to you about the legal ramifications, is, this wasn't a surprise. We knew this big mass group of people that they were coming to Washington. I had read a couple of days ago that there were rumblings about storming the Capitol and all this stuff. Why wasn't law enforcement better prepared for this? Why was there such a lag time between DOD? They requested the National Guard. I'm getting bits and pieces of this, everyone, so please correct me, Neil, if I'm wrong about this, but it did take some time for them to get the National Guard in there. So what the hell? What was going on?
Right. As I understand it, the request for the National Guard was rejected earlier today. And that's despite people knowing that violence was definitely a real risk. I mean, all of us who work near Washington, in Washington, got emails from our employers basically saying, stay away from town today and the like. So this was no surprise at all. The National Guard thing is very interesting because I think, we're obviously it'll take an investigation. We'll get to the bottom of it. But one thing is DC doesn't have the power, like every state, to have their governor call out the National Guard because we don't have a governor. We have to go and make a request to the Trump administration for the National Guard to be called out. And I do think one effect of this is going to be on January 20th, DC statehood will be one of the very first legislative items introduced. And it's for a long time coming, and there's a million reasons for it, but one is to avoid the mishmash of situations that happen today. And there's a trite point, and I don't mean trite, but I mean it's a point that you're hearing now a lot. People say well, forget it. I'll go on. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. What were you saying?
I think that there's the question about whether or not, we've done enough to prevent this. Obviously, we did. Now the question is, what are we going to do about it? And, the legal implications, and should these people be put in jail? Should Donald Trump be criminally prosecuted for fomenting or stoking this action?
Some people are asking this, and I don't know the answer. So they're asking, did the DOD deny, activating the Guard, or was that Donald Trump? Who basically activates the National Guard in the nation's capital?
Right. I'm just reading the same press as everyone else is, and there are press reports that say it was done by a Department of Defense official. But so far we don't know more than that, and even whether that's accurate or not. This is going to be a very serious investigation because this is one of the most incredible failures of national security in the country's history. I mean, the last time that you had people, I believe, storming the Capitol was in the War of 1812 with the Brits.
Right.
And so, Trump wanted to make America great again. I think he's made America 1812 again instead.
Well, no, all kidding aside, what are the consequences for, you're the lawyer, inciting violence, sedition, I don't know. What is this, Neil?
So first, let's start with the folks who stormed the Capitol, with violence and the like. That is, Vice President-elect Biden called it, close to sedition or some language like that. It actually is sedition. So the statute is 18 U.S.C. 2384. And it says that if two or more people conspire to overthrow or to by force take or possess any property of the United States, that's what seditious conspiracy is. That's exactly what they tried to do. It's textbook. These are easy prosecutions. These are the kind of cases that prosecutors don't even, frankly, need to almost show up in court for. They're that easy. So, I certainly hope that these people that are in the Capitol now are being arrested and not simply sent home and being put in jail. But
a lot of them were, as somebody mentioned, a lot of them were armed.
Yeah. Exactly, and armed in the Capitol, and obviously there's a shooting in the Capitol as well. There are now reports that there were 2 IED devices that were brought in or near the Capitol as well. These are like some of the most serious crimes imaginable in the federal code. I sure hope they're being enforced. I'm going to put an asterisk on this because I'm worried about Trump and his pardon power here. So let's talk about that in a minute. But in a normal world, these are really easy crimes to prosecute. Harder question, can you prosecute President Trump for inciting this violence? My view is you can. My view is this is, and the evidence would probably show this is not something that he didn't think was going to happen. I think there's a report in the New York Times that his senior staff has said that that's what he wanted to happen. So I don't know, but I do think that's the kind of stuff that a law enforcement investigation would reveal.
What is the actual crime, Neil? Like what, inciting violence? I mean, what would he be prosecuted for?
Yeah, so incitement or solicitation of a felony is itself a felony. So if I'm if I'm kind of encouraging you to do something and I know that you're going to do it, that's a problem. Now, obviously, there's free speech and other stuff. These are tough prosecutions. So it's the opposite of what I was saying before about filing cases against the protesters. Regardless of the question of whether or not a crime has been committed, you have the separate question, is this an impeachable offense? And, 2 days ago, we talked about my views that the president should be impeached for the Georgia tape. At the time I thought, the impeachment process can start now. There's no reason for it to have to conclude anytime because you impeach in order not just to remove someone from office, but also to disqualify them from future office holding. Now I feel like there's a lot of velocity behind the idea of an impeachment over President Trump for this conduct today. And even the National Association of Manufacturers, which is a centrist right organization, they're kind of like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, today called on the 25th Amendment to be invoked.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that because a lot of people are talking about the 25th Amendment. Explain what that is and also about how Mike Pence would have to actually go along with that, right?
Yeah, so there are 2 ways of removing a president. One is impeachment, the other is the 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment requires a majority vote of the cabinet plus the vote of the vice president. So in the past, the president has always been protected by his vice president who, has always done his bidding up until, of course, earlier today when the vice president broke from him and said he wasn't going to count the votes in favor of him and the like. The case for either of those is really this. We still have 2 weeks to go. What kind of damage is Trump going to do in the next 2 weeks? This is not someone who is well. This is not someone who puts the interests of the country over himself. So whether it's, military action, domestic action against our own people, or whether it's simply just pardoning all the people who were engaged in the crimes today, he still has the full powers of the presidency right now. And the case to me for either impeachment or the 25th Amendment is we can't tolerate, frankly, another minute of this guy in office. I mean, it was one thing when it was just like he was going to use the power to, give the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Devin Nunes or something like that, which is obviously despicable and horrible, but not something that can do lasting damage to the United States. But this guy now can do lasting damage to the United States.
Well, he tweeted about 15 minutes ago for people who aren't like doing multi-screens right now. Let me just read. He said, Trump tweeted, this is just insane, Neil. He says, these are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever. Like he's saying, remember the Alamo or something. He continues to insist, and this in and of itself is fueling these kinds of actions by what many people are saying. Don't call them protesters, call them domestic terrorists.
You have one of the gravest things to happen in history's country happening today with the storming of the Capitol. And what does this guy do? He sends out a couple of tweets. And the tweets, by the way, are like, I love you. And then has his grievance stuff about, winning the election when nobody thinks so, not even Mitch
A sacred
McConnell.
landslide election. By the way, a lot of people, maybe you could just take us back to law school for those of us who didn't go. A lot of people are asking the difference between impeachment and the 25th Amendment. Can you explain that pretty simply for us, Neil?
Yeah, sure. So 25th Amendment is just the cabinet vote plus the vice president to remove someone from office. It's internal to the executive branch. It doesn't require Congress in any way, shape, or form. The impeachment process is the one that we all saw in Ukraine. The House has to vote by majority vote to say, accuse the president of doing something wrong. That's called impeachment. And then the Senate is supposed to have a trial in order to decide whether to convict him of that, and that requires a 2/3 supermajority. The last time around, Mitch McConnell truncated and didn't really have that trial because he was afraid of what the trial would show. Unclear where the dynamics are now if there is another impeachment. I think the Republicans have realized they bet on the wrong horse here, that they threw their lot in with the devil, and it's now showing. And, impeachment could be an attractive opportunity for them to try and distance themselves from this constitutional and moral abomination in Donald Trump.
My friend Brian Goldsmith just wrote that we need a bipartisan national commission to investigate who instigated and abetted this attempted coup.
Yeah, I think a national investigation makes some sense, but this is also a law enforcement matter. So we have to remember that we don't want to have dueling, overlapping investigations, because you can have any number of immunity questions and the like when that happens, and you don't want one to interfere with the other. So right now, we have, one piece of good news that got overshadowed by so much else today, but Joe Biden nominated Merrick Garland to be Attorney General. That is as solid and fair and decent and balanced a nominee as this country has ever had, frankly, for any position, let alone the head of the Justice Department. So
and there is also some, a certain amount of payback there too, given what happened to Merrick Garland and when he was nominated, how Mitch McConnell refused to even meet with the guy to fill the Supreme Court position way longer than Amy Coney Barrett. So it was kind of an FU, wasn't it?
Well, I think it was done for all the right reasons, which is literally, there is no one more qualified for the job. Right. So all of that, I think is and also, at this time when Trump has so spit and destroyed the Justice Department, you really need to have, frankly, the greatest person to try and put things back. And, there were other amazing nominees. Sally Yates would have been phenomenal as well.
Right.
But the fact is that we now are going to have an attorney general who every American should have 100% faith that this investigation about what happened today will be done as competently and fairly as you could imagine. And so I don't like the idea of a national commission or this or that interfering with Merrick Garland's work.
Yeah, unimpeachable credentials, which probably is maybe a word that comes to mind right now. Whether it's the 25th Amendment or impeachment, all of this is going to take time. And we're just we're not far from the inauguration anyway. But I guess the question is, and I know that a lot of people in John's family were debating this. He can be impeached even if he's no longer in office, because it would keep him from running again. Is that right?
Yes, but before getting there, I just want to say, I do think an impeachment or a 25th Amendment process is capable of all unfolding within a week. Remember, they broke the rules basically to confirm Amy Coney Barrett in 36 days, a lifetime appointment to our nation's highest court. That's a hard question. It's not frankly, a very hard question about what to do about this president. I think it's a pretty simple one, particularly given the massive powers he wields right now as we sit here and talk, and to danger. Now, the founders, I think, now there's a debate about this among scholars, but I think the best evidence is that the founders intended impeachment to occur even after someone left office for former officials. That was certainly what happened in the British government, before the founding. It's happened in 1876 with Secretary Stanton in the United States. But to eliminate any confusion about it, I just think as long as the process begins while he's a sitting president, it can continue on, and the votes can actually happen down the road. In the Constitution, it's express. The punishment's not just removal from office, but also disqualification from future office holding. And my view is this person has no business running for any office again, not even dog catcher.
By the way, I think George W. Bush issued a statement, and Molner's here with me, Neil. He has some questions he wants to ask you, but he said, "This is how election results are disputed in a banana republic, not our democratic republic. I am appalled by the reckless behavior of some political leaders since the election and by the lack of respect shown today for our institutions, our traditions, and our law enforcement. The violent assault on the Capitol and disruption of a constitutionally mandated meeting of Congress was undertaken by people whose passions have been inflamed by falsehoods and false hopes. Insurrection could do grave damage to our nation and reputation." I watch Fox News, and they're still spewing this garbage about a rigged election. I mean, how much responsibility should they hold for some of what unfolded today?
Well, I mean, Fox is repeating, after all, what the president of the United States is saying in his supposed quelling of violence. He keeps on insisting that the election was stolen in this nonsense. So I'm not sure it's,
Well, I think they feed each other. I think he repeats Fox News and Fox News repeats him. They're like on a loop.
Yeah, it very well could be that. But I just think, ultimately the question is, we don't elect Fox News for anything. We do elect the president, and we expect him to behave with a modicum of decency and respect for the Constitution, for law and order. And here you've got a guy who instead is stoking the violence and who's stoking all of these lies that he won the election. I mean, the idea that he won the election is preposterous, as even Mitch McConnell himself said today.
Hey, John, you want to ask Neil a question?
How you doing, Neil?
Hey, my friend.
Enjoying your nightly updates. I'm not going to comment on your performance singing the other evening.
Let's see you sing, man.
No, I'm not going to try. How do you handicap do you think any minds are being changed in the United States Senate? So if, in fact, the House quickly brought impeachment and it moved quickly to the Senate, do you think that the events of the last 24 hours or so are changing minds, or do you think it's sort of that's not where Republicans are going to go, even if they're disappointed or even appalled at what the president's done?
I do. I think they are appalled, and you have to be, outside of maybe the treason caucus of the 11 senators, I think the rest of them are appalled. And I think there's a moment of reckoning, whether they want to admit it or not. And I think the case for an impeachment vote, make them go on the record. They want to support leaving this guy in office. By all means, say so, and let the American people think about what that vote looks like, in 2 years when they come up for re-election.
Go ahead.
So, and one more. So, okay. In addition, what's the next step in terms of certifying the election? So where do things stand? And are they going to pick up the debates and the protests again, or are they going to just certify the election?
So as I understand it, there is an intent on both the House and Senate to have these votes tonight. And the mahogany boxes with the votes were picked up and carried out of the Capitol by a smart Senate staffer. So those are secured. And I don't think Hawley and Cruz and the other members of the Treason Caucus have, said what they're going to do yet. The plan was that they were going to, have their objections, and I suspect, that they'll probably still continue. They've thrown their lot in this way. I think, those folks are pretty much dead to democracy at this point. But that debate's only 2 hours, I think, per objection. So I think tonight we could have a final certified, election winner.
And one more for you and for Katie. Do you expect Trump to come out and throw Pence to the wolves now that he sort of hasn't tried to support the overturn of the election? Is it just a matter of hours before Trump denounces Pence, or does Trump still need Pence for some reason? I'm interested both Neil and your and Katie's view on that.
Yeah, it's a hard question. I mean,
Yeah.
firing your own vice president. I mean, even Donald Trump, I'm not sure would want to go through that publicity cycle. You know, and
He already dissed Pence, though, right?
yeah,
When Pence said he wasn't going to do it, I can't keep up with all the name calling, but I think he already came out publicly and criticized Pence for that,
yeah.
right?
So the TikTok here is yesterday. Maggie Haberman of the New York Times reported that Pence was going to not, throw the election to Trump. Trump then issues a press release dated from last year that says that's all fake news and Pence is going to support him. Pence, of course, then while Trump is speaking and stoking violence, issues his statement saying, I'm not going to support you. And then, yes, Trump, threw a conniption at Pence after that later today. I think the one, my gut is that, Pence and Trump will ride it out, I think, and stay in office. But, the guy is so unstable, who knows? And certainly if Pence makes noises about the 25th Amendment and Trump gets wind of it, then I certainly think, yeah, it's like that fictional TV. I don't remember, it's 24.
By the way, what's required in the 25th Amendment? It's the vice president plus how many cabinet?
Majority.
Majority. Simple
Yeah,
majority.
and I can't remember I think there's a debate about this, whether acting officials count or not. I think almost everyone is acting, at least in a metaphysical sense, but I don't know.
Hey, the last thing I wanted to mention to you and Neil, while you were doing that timeline of Trump's sort of pathway towards the violence we saw today, I would actually date it from the campaign to when Trump said, I could stand on Fifth Avenue and shoot someone, which he said in the presidential primaries, to today when in fact somebody was shot at the end of his presidency. That's sort of the timeline you have.
100%. And even all the violence he encouraged on the media and so on. I mean, people like Katie Tur and others. I mean, so yeah, this has been this guy's modus operandi. And for years, people have been saying, how can you support this guy to Republicans? And they just laughed and, said it was, nothing and accused people of being snowflakes and the like. This is what happens. You're the president of the United States and you say this garbage, people listen.
By the way, just a couple things to share with everyone who's watching. The governor of Washington is under attack. My team is communicating with me. Demonstrators in Olympia have broken through the gate in front of the governor's mansion. Another breaking piece of news, someone wrote, "Murder the media" on a Capitol door. And Mitt Romney said, those who choose to continue to support his dangerous gambit, meaning Trump's, will forever be seen as being complicit in an unprecedented attack against our democracy. They will be remembered for their role in this shameful episode in American history. That will be their legacy. So those are just kind of things to keep in mind. I will give you more information about the governor of Washington. Trump demonstrators have broken through the gate in front of the governor's mansion. This is really, really insane. And what about somebody like Ted Cruz? I mean, what are the repercussions for somebody like Ted Cruz? Neil?
I'm sorry, you broke up there, so I heard you say this.
That. I was asking about Ted Cruz and some of these other people who really have been fanning the flame of this false narrative about a rigged election. What will happen to people like him? I mean, is there anything that can be done to him?
Well, I mean, I don't know that Cruz is, Cruz is talking about the rigged election, which is crazy and ridiculous. I don't know that he faces the same sort of liability as someone like Trump, who's actively going around encouraging people to march and storm the Capitol and the like. So I think they are going to be different circumstances, but and I think even different morally. I mean, if you or I were the president, or frankly, any decent human being at this moment in time, we wouldn't be sitting there on our couch watching TV and crying about the election we lost. We'd be doing everything we can to stop the violence, whether it's in Washington State or Washington, D.C. This guy, nothing, crickets. He's just sitting there grieving and screaming at the TV like a old fool. And And, that to me is, the saddest part about it. It's actually not that different than his reaction to coronavirus. So it's the same thing, like just go and blame everyone else and yell at the TV instead of actually doing something.
Yeah. Mary Trump, the president's niece, who and I interviewed, said, oh, wait, they're jumping around here. You guys don't do that because I was trying to read this. Basically, she tweeted a statement saying the abject failure of the DC police force needs to be investigated. I heard rumors that there are police taking selfies with people inside the Capitol. Who knows if that's true? But do you think there should be an investigation into the DOD and the handling of this entire fiasco?
100%. And look, I think, I know a lot of the Capitol Police personally, and these are really awesome people. So I think an investigation needs to be had. My gut is it's going to be a few bad apples. And yeah, I think we see some stuff on Twitter of a few people taking pictures from law enforcement with the protesters, but we don't know the context of that and so on.
Yeah.
We don't know if that was early on before the mayhem started and the like. So I think, let's give everyone a break. I'm always worried about when pictures being judged out of context and, look spliced to make it look like something else. But something obviously really wrong happened here. And, people have been saying this on TV all day, and I think it's worth emphasizing, which is, if these protesters were African-American or Muslim, and we knew that, DC police and, the federal government knew that they were coming to DC, I think the whole reaction would have been different start to finish.
A lot of people have made that comment in the comment section.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Molnar has another
question.
Sorry,
Neil, sorry to come back in.
That's okay.
Hey, when do you expect the next round of presidential pardons to come? And are you expecting those to include the family, his daughter, his sons, and even himself?
100%. That I think it'll happen soon. I think he's going to pardon everyone, including himself. Because look, even if Judge Garland didn't want to prosecute Trump for the stuff up until now, the actions today make it really hard to look the other way. I mean, this is not a normal president. And, you as any law enforcement official, you obviously want to give deference to a former leader. The last thing you want to do is criminalize politics and the like. But when you've got a president who does the stuff he did today, it takes him out of the realm of, former government leader and puts him in the realm of thug, criminal, and the like. And so if I'm Trump right now sitting, and I understand that dynamic, I think even if I had any doubt about whether to try and pardon myself, I'm going to do it. I don't think the self-pardon is going to work in the end. And of course, it'll only work at the federal level anyway. And there could be any number of state crimes that have been committed. Trump is, to me, a walking felon. So, I think that pardon power alone isn't going to get him what he needs, but I think he's going to try it.
And Neil, the pardon can be, as Ford's pardon was for Nixon, broad and including all past misdeeds or crime.
That's an open question. Sir, you're right to say that that's what Gerald Ford did for Nixon. It was a blanket pardon for like 5 years of activity. I actually don't think that can survive, because one of the whole points of the pardon power is to encourage accountability. And so you're supposed to, I think, the reason why presidents have an relatively unrestricted pardon power is because they do it in full view of the public, and the public understands what the pardon is about. If you just have a vague, true get out of jail free card, you diminish that accountability rationale. So I don't think it'll actually hold up. I think Trump is going to try it, but I don't think it'll hold up. With Nixon, it was never tested, of course.
Hey,
thanks, Neil.
Bye,
Thank
John. John, is the Molnar portion of this interview is done. Mary Trump also tweeted, every seditionist House member who has supported and encouraged this attempted coup needs to be expelled. I mean, can these people be expelled, or can they be sanctioned, or what, for the people who are propping him up and fueling this whole insane narrative, can anything happen to them?
Yeah, so I mean, they could. The Constitution does provide for the power to expel members in it. It's a vote. I think it requires, if I recall, in my constitutional law in Article 1, Section 5, I think a 2/3 vote.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. How do you
and
just pull that out of your ass, Neil?
well, I do each year teach a case called Powell versus McCormick, which is about this. It's just I haven't taught it now in 3 years. So, so I can't totally remember all of the facts of it, but I am quite pretty sure that it is a 2/3 vote in Article 1. And 2/3 vote, a supermajority, very hard to get, of course.
Well, they
in the
could be
nature
set.
code.
What about censuring them?
Yeah, so there's opportunities to censure, which could be done by a majority vote, and I definitely think that should be looked at here.
I bet it will. Don't you
yeah.
think that will, Neil?
Yes. At the same time, let me just say, and it's a hard thing to say because my passions on this are so strong, and I feel like these people have behaved with such utter disregard for the Constitution and the law. But I also hope that there's a way in which Mitch McConnell today, or Tom Cotton, and senators Inhofe and Moran, that's even all of this can be stitched together into something to say, hey, we realize now we've stared into the abyss and we've learned our lesson, and we want to move forward. We want to move forward as one country. Our national motto is "E pluribus unum," out of many one, and we want to somehow turn the page. And sometimes turning the page requires accountability and getting to the bottom of what happened. Absolutely. I'm not at all advocating against that. I think we got to find out who did what and when and why. And there should be some punishments, but also it can't be done in some sort of vindictive, spiteful way. It's got to be done, what we need in order to get the country moving forward, and then take the majority of Republicans and Democrats who are law-abiding people and somehow stitch them together into the party of the United States.
Yeah. Hey, I know I'm going to let you go in a second. Basically, someone asked what censuring does. It's basically saying you're bad. You made a mistake. Bad on you. But that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, it's a reprimand. It's, and just like if you're at work and your boss reprimands you or something. The one thing I will say,
it goes into your record, right?
It is on your, the violent femmes say, it does go on your permanent record. And I do think it means that it goes on, for your legacy. And so I think people take that, at least a little bit seriously. I mean, Donald Trump has tried to define decency down tremendously, but I still think people care.
If in fact the 25th Amendment is invoked, that means he couldn't run again too, right?
I don't think so. I think the 25th Amendment is just about removing you from current office.
So that would not necessarily preclude him from running for office again for the presidency?
I think as a formal matter, I think that's right. I'll have to go back and look at the text, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
I'm a little disappointed, Neil, that you don't know that.
It's been a long day, man.
I know it's been a long day.
Yeah.
And one person has been killed. We can only pray that there isn't more violence tonight. My team told me that there are officers from New Jersey that are coming to Washington to help. It does seem very strange to me, as Mary Trump tweeted, but as I noted even before that somehow they weren't prepared for this, seeing what happened in Charlottesville, seeing what has happened in other rallies. This was just a recipe for disaster, and I can't believe they weren't better prepared. Quick audience questions, because I want to respond to all the nice people who are joining us for this conversation. What charges can be brought against the rioters? Can you just repeat? I know you mentioned that early on in our conversation, Neil. And people are calling them domestic terrorists, whatever you guys want to call them. But the people who stormed the Capitol, I guess, I don't know. What would you call them, Neil?
So they very well, some of them will be labeled domestic terrorists, and they brought in improvised explosive devices and the like. Those are specific crimes against that, specific crimes against bringing weapons into federal buildings. But I think your questioner is really asking the kind of, is this seditious conspiracy? And yes, 18 U.S.C. 2384 says when two or more people conspire to go and take over or control any property of the United States, that is seditious conspiracy, and it's punishable by a 20-year felony. And all of those people that you saw on TV today, they all looking pretty much like seditious conspirators at this point.
You know what I hear over and over again? I heard it when I covered Charlottesville. I heard it on numerous occasions. I've heard it during the Black Lives Matter protests over the summer. You know, people automatically seem to claim, oh, this is Antifa, this is BLM people. Is that part of the narrative so that there doesn't have to be accountability? Usually they point a finger when it comes to violence and say, it wasn't us. These were these other people trying to make us look bad.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, I know that they've tried that in the past. This time the Trump protesters were not that smart. They all wore Trump hats. They literally brought a Confederate flag into the United States Capitol building. They have all sorts, you know, they were proud to take their pictures taken even while they're holding weapons and stuff like that. So I think it'll be pretty easy to identify who these people are and what their motivations were.
It's crazy though. Isn't that weird that that's always the default position? It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's always, you know, but that's been the Trump MO for years, which is blame the other side for whatever he's doing. So, you know, and I think that the protesters today, they felt they could act with impunity. They thought Trump had their back. And, you know, he very well may have their back. He may pardon them all. You know, but again, I still think that there may be state or local crimes that'll be available.
Someone asked if the impeachment, can he be impeached immediately? I think I read that Ilhan Omar and somebody else, they were drawing up the articles of impeachment.
Correct. Yeah, I think it should happen tomorrow. I think tomorrow morning there should be articles introduced, and I think there should be a vote tomorrow night.
Okay, and somebody, I guess they stole federal property and defaced some of the things in the Capitol. Somebody asked, where was the National Guard? As we said earlier, there was a request made to activate the National Guard to the DOD because Washington, D.C. is not a state, so they didn't have somebody in that position to act. They didn't have a governor to activate the National Guard. That was denied by DOD officials, is my understanding.
That's what I've read.
Yeah. Anyway, fine. I guess someone asked, and then we'll wrap this up. Do you think this is the end of the Trump era or the beginning of something worse?
I mean, you know, today is a horrible, horrible day for the country, but I do have a dose of optimism about the future because I think that this is the moment of reckoning. I mean, this is the logical culmination of what Trumpism is. And some people saw it earlier than others. But now it's hard for anyone to look away and not know what this malignancy is all about. And so, you know, I think that there's a core of decency to everyone, almost everyone in this country, Republican or Democrat. And so I think, you know, an event like today can be that moment to say, let's move forward. And so as sad as it is, it's heartbreaking to see these images. You know, there's an image of like someone holding the Confederate flag in the Capitol, which is something that literally from 1861 to 65 never happened, but happened today. That's a heartbreaking image, heartbreaking that, you know, a woman has been shot and died in the Capitol. But out of this horror, I think will come something good.
Yeah, and you know, we should mention that it's the 6th, so we've got a couple of weeks till the inauguration. And, you know, I think hopefully there's not going to be more violence. April Ryan, who's a friend of mine, is reporting leaders are gathering now to discuss the 25th Amendment. That has not been verified. I don't know what leader she's referring to. But, you know, I mean, this is a really serious problem to say. I mean, that's the understatement of the year, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is. You know, the good news is we're nearing the end and we're going to have a grown up in charge soon. We can only go up. You know, we're pretty much at rock bottom, but we got to make it through the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that means putting pressure, all of you watching, you got to make sure your representatives and your senators don't think about party now. This is not the time. just think about how to get us through in an orderly, stable way in our proud traditions as Americans of, respectfully disagreeing with one another. You want to protest? Absolutely fine. Protest. Use your voice. Use your speech. Don't use your guns.
I also think this is really put a big light on sort of the system and what doesn't work and how we need to shore up these institutions and these laws to make sure that there's not this kind of abuse of power in the future, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, Madison said in the Federalist Papers, he's like, what's law? It's just a mere parchment barrier. And there's, something true about that. You can write all the laws you want. I mean, there are laws against everything that happened today.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's always people, at least until we live in a world of AI or artificial intelligence overlords or something, that are going to enforce it. And so it does depend on democracy. It depends on the judgments of Americans to elect people who represent the decency and respectfulness that Americans have. And honestly, we just didn't have that here. We had a person who's, instead of a commander-in-chief, a terrorist-in-chief. That's what we had. And we should label it as that. And we should, call it for what it is and say to ourselves, never again. I don't care what Supreme Court nomination or what tax cut or this or that. Nothing is worth this.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a good way to end it. Thank you, whoever. Oh, hi, my friend Pat Shifke's wishing me an early happy birthday because my birthday is tomorrow, but I'm trying to ignore it because I am turning the age of Paul McCartney's song, and it's really bumming me out, Neil.
Hey, man, if you're as beautiful and wise as you are, you don't have to worry at all, man. So,
thank you, Neil. That's a nice way to end this live stream. Anyway, you guys keep the faith. Hopefully this too shall pass. And thank you, Neil. I think you're a real voice, not only a voice of reason, but a lot of authority and integrity. And I think that people really appreciate hearing from you and the fact that you're trying to help us make sense of a really insane situation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Happy birthday.
All right. If you guys like what you see, subscribe right here.